Hey everybody, welcome back to Amar City. In this episode I'm working on the beginnings of one of the islands that surrounds the downtown island, and I'll be particularly focusing on the Marina Bay area, which is going to provide a bit of a secondary downtown. I'll be looking at the small downtown itself and talking a bit about the ideas and theories that sort of back up what I'm doing here, but most of all, it's going to be a bit of a prototype of what the rest of the smaller islands around the downtown are going to be like. So without further ado, let's get into the time-lapse. Alright, now I'm starting off with laying out what the entire area is going to look like, because I wanted to have very specific shapes for the islands around the central island, and I feel, in a sense, they're a bit harder to do than the actual island in the middle, for some reasons that I'll get back to in later episodes. But basically one of the reasons why it took me so long to get this episode done was because I wanted to sketch out the outlines of what all the islands are going to be and how they're going to be laid out. And before I had that, I didn't want to start working on it, so I only started doing this once I already had all of the outlines of the islands there, which also meant that in-game it was actually pretty easy. I was just following the guidelines that I made before. So here you can see me shaping up the border between two islands, which is just a small canal, and the very half-round circle marina area. But it also kind of means that it took me a lot longer than I expected beforehand to actually get into the game and start making this stuff. But especially at this point, it was an enormous help, and most of the things would have taken much more time in game as well if I didn't know exactly where to place certain things and how to go about doing things. I do have to say I changed my plans a little bit in a sense, since my original plan was to have 5 islands surrounding the main island. Which has no particular symbolic reason. It is kind of like a desert flower or the 5 pillars of Islam, but that aside, it's not really relevant in any way, so I figured I wanted to bump up the island count to 10, just split every single island in 2 and have one downtown core for each of the islands, which I'll get back to in a little bit. But it does mean that the layout of these things is a little bit different. So the marina that we have right now is on the border of one of these 2 islands, which together sort of form one district of the city, and we'll have one sort of downtown area alongside that Marina Bay. Now what I also wanted to do is get the main roads in before I did the rest, because I didn't actually plan the exact road layouts. I just wanted to see and test with all of the different buildings that I want to use what really works best when it comes to the layouts of the roads. I just had a very basic idea of what I wanted to do. And I had the main roads laid out on paper, so I'm just copying these at this point to make sure that I have all that right to fill it in at a later stage. And I also wanted to quickly fill in the bay, make sure that that's all looking finished, so that we have a pretty clear idea of what it's going to look like once I get all of the buildings in. And this was also quite interesting, because I haven't actually seen that many marinas in City Skylines. I've seen quite a few on pictures. The only one that I've really seen on video is Fluxtrances recently, which is really great. I mean, I'm not even sure if I should plug this at this point anymore, but if you don't know him somehow, I mean, for one, what planet have you been living on? But 2, you should totally check out his stuff, because it's mind-blowingly good. But anyway, I watched his marina, and that sort of got me going. I might actually add some marinas into the city, and especially honestly, since many of the Gulf cities focus so much on marinas, especially in some of their like newer developments, to take the Dubai marina for an example, but also the Pearl of Qatar, or some of the new housing developments really in Bahrain. It has a bunch of them. They all have a lot of marinas lined alongside all of the developments that they have. And so I wanted to take some inspiration from this, except do it on a slightly smaller scale, because especially Dubai's marina, I feel, is too large to even be comprehensible on any human scale. So I just wanted to leave it to one half circle, and I didn't want to create a marina that's just sort of a marina that's out there and not actually connected to the city at all. I kind of wanted to make it like you have some of these smaller marinas in very old Dutch towns, where it actually sort of fills in on the old city center. So you've got the city center with the shops and a little waterfront, and then the boats just kind of finish up the entire picture. It just makes it a bit more idyllic in a sense, and that's also why I wanted to keep this marina quite small. And so what I'm laying out here is actually the main sort of shopping road. It's not a road where cars are going to be. It's a very Dutch kind of thing almost. I honestly took a lot of inspiration from Dutch cities. Not that you see it, not that you don't see it anywhere else, but these kinds of roads leading up to or connecting the main points in some older towns are very common around here. And I figured this would be a good place to have a small city center that's just sort of outside the actual city downtown, with some shops and some of the services that you want to have close by and not have to travel half the city for. But at the same time, keep it small enough so that it doesn't become an actual downtown on its own. And this is sort of inspired by the idea of having cities that are made up of clusters. Like a usual, very typical city is just a CBD, a downtown in the middle, and around that just rings that get more suburban and more rural as you go to the outer rings of the city. So a city is pretty much like a circle with the densest part in the middle. But especially recently there have been many ideas about making it different, in a sense that a city might need to be made up of different kinds of clusters. So you've got a bunch of sort of city islands, with each of them having their own downtown, perhaps having one central downtown which is the biggest, but definitely making sure that you don't have to travel so far and that you actually have some sort of sub-downtowns, which sounds very abstract and weird, but it's actually pretty common in real life. You definitely see it a lot in Dutch cities. Rotterdam, for example, has an actual old downtown, but around some of the very large, more new neighborhoods and parts of the cities, there are these sort of intertwined malls and places where there are a lot of office rooms and commercial space, but also a lot of tram lines, bus lines, and metro lines, where everything just sort of comes together in a sort of sub-downtown, where you can go to the sub-downtown for any of your groceries or most of the things that you're looking for, and the real downtown is really just for most of the nightlife and things like that. It's just a way to be able to live in a more local sort of area within the city, while at the same time, of course, it is still pretty interconnected because you're still in the actual downtown of the city pretty quickly with one of the light rail systems here, or even the roads. It is still quite close to the center of the city. But anyway, this is what inspired me to have a city with multiple sort of downtowns, except of course each of these is going to be a bit smaller than the actual downtown. They're just a bit of a center for the neighborhood and the community that's around here. So that's also why it's really just one street. I didn't want to go beyond this in any way, and really these houses don't really fill up much more than that either, than just a nice looking waterfront for the Marina, which is also why I wanted to get into a lot of lush foliage over here and make it a little bit more green and less gloomy than it was before. But then aside, this is really not much special, just a bunch of residential developments, but it's gonna be the shopping street where I'm gonna have the very small downtown section, and I'll also be hooking it up with a light rail station very close by, as well as a bus line, and of course it is right next to well, some very important roads over here. It pretty much just connects the Marina in a straight line with the road, which did end up causing some issues with laying out the city later on, since it diverts a bit from the standard grid layout, which I'll be following in most of the cities, so it does become a little bit messy, but then I do kind of like the organic look of that. Also, those splinters are super sweet if you actually use the line tool to place them and make the difference in like the setting that they're placed apart very small, so they actually sink into each other, and you can make these very long kind of grass patches in the shape that you want to have, which is really beautiful, and it's perfect for making custom planters like that. Anyway, here I'm placing the light rail station. I'm not really sure if I should call it a light rail at this point. It's a bit like, well, no, it is just a light rail, more or less. I didn't want to go for a metro, by the way, just because I felt a bit safer going for a light rail in this kind of area, and I haven't seen any metro systems in these kinds of artificial island areas. Sure, there's an underground metro in the very downtown core, or one of the downtown cores of Dubai, and stuff like that, but it just felt like a light rail system, especially with this kind of next to the sea, and honestly pretty vulnerable man-made artificial islands, that a light rail system would be a bit more feasible than an underground metro. So that's why I went for that. The only real danger here is that it sort of cuts the city into different parts. But just by placing it next to these large roads that are cutting the city anyway, I hope that sort of minimizes the damage that it has on street life. And here I'm just making the shopping section with a bunch of, well, any commercial building that fits into each other. I'll be dressing up some of these buildings a little bit with some signs later on, just because any building can be made into a restaurant or shop looking building just by placing any of the restaurant or shop signs onto them, which is something that I just love doing. The entire tool which lets you place props onto buildings is, for me at least, a game changer, since I just love being able to add that extra detail onto buildings and actually give buildings a different meaning than they originally have. And this is kind of where the clusterfuck part came in, because I wanted to have this station right here, but I also wanted to make that small square with buildings on the side, and in the end it just turned into a bit of an awkward shape that breaks the monotony of the grid a little bit, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. I'm not really sure about it yet. We'll wait for the rest of the city to be finished and I'll see how that works out, but it's a bit of a change of pace from the otherwise completely grid center of the city itself. Interestingly though, this part of the city is not just smaller in terms of the downtown just being one street, but also the streets are a bit closer to each other. I actually think I made some of the streets in the old downtown a bit too wide, especially, you know, considering that this is a super hot country and I want to get as much shade in on the streets as I can, and surely a lot of these trees will get you a lot of shade, but it might be better to just keep especially some of these roads between the neighborhoods quite narrow if you're just walking on them anyway. So yeah, I made that a bit smaller, but also, you know, the layout, the circles themselves are a bit smaller. Everything about this area is just a bit smaller than the actual downtown of the city. And the only thing, I suppose, that hasn't really changed, because I even started using different assets, because some new assets have come out that I figure actually fit the kind of theme that I'm going for very well. I suppose the only thing that hasn't changed is the way that I'm laying out the roads and making the paths with all of the decals and all of the concrete that I have around here. I'm still using most of the planters that I used before to keep that sort of continuity going. And also, especially around the edges here, I did want to use some of the same buildings that I already used earlier, just to keep a similar look throughout the city. I definitely don't want the city to end up looking like just completely disconnected districts. I'm trying to experiment a bit with having slightly different buildings per district, so there's at least a little bit of difference between them. But that aside, I do want to keep it as much as one recognizable hall as I can. And here I'm just quickly making the bus loop, which just added to the clusterfuck, but I was like, yeah, well, whatever, let's just try it, because I did want to get a bus in so that people can actually go to the shopping street quite easily. And it's sort of a back road to it anyway, so that works quite well. And finishing off the residential area with some of these flats that really fit together very well. I'm actually really happy with how these buildings turn out. They don't have an extremely Arab looking vibe to them. Honestly, there are no buildings in the workshop that I was hoping for to get for the sort of vibe that I wanted to go for. Obviously there are some extremely large skyscrapers from Dubai and stuff like that, but that's actually not the stuff that I'm looking for. I'm really looking for the modern buildings that have some traditional Arab influences, but at the same time look a bit Western, and they're just sort of mid-rise kind of buildings. Not to mention that mid-rise buildings in general are kind of lacking in this game. But anyway, I didn't exactly find what I was looking for, but these white buildings that have the balcony sticking out on the fronts are kind of what I'm looking for. And especially since you can sort of switch between using the fronts as the front or rotating the building and using the back as the front, which actually works, you can actually get some slightly different looks in. But anyway, here I went to the Marina and actually started working on that. And this took a little bit of experimentation at first, because I found that boat and I was like, it's a very good boat, but it doesn't actually float with the water. It doesn't actually move with the water like these boats do. The only problem that I had with these boats is that they don't appear when I was placing them, and I'm still not sure if this is a bug or if this is something that always happens, but it just kind of made placing these boats a little bit hard. But I don't want to complain about this at all because, you know, it's a free service anyway, and these are absolutely amazing boats. For the longest time, boats that you can use in a marina have been extremely scarce. Same goes for when Fluxtrans was building his. There weren't even any sailboats, and sailboats are like the most recognizable thing in these marinas. But there's a pretty good collection of them right now, and you can definitely see the boats repeating, but it does give an overall marina kind of vibe, especially with all of the sailboats. Now finally, I still had this wall on this side, and I didn't want to use any keys to finish this off because I felt like keys would make it too bulky, and I wanted to make a very narrow wall that almost looks like a wave breaker. Speaking of which, I'll be getting into those in later episodes as well, since I actually put a stupid amount of research into them. But I wanted to put that in there just to make it a little bit more elegant. And finally, get into some of the detailing around the city. I haven't really done a lot of detailing and small foliage work yet, and everything just looks sort of naked. I've only done the detailing around the actual shopping street, but areas like these have been pretty neglected, and that's what I wanted to do for most of the remaining part of this episode. It's just kind of hard sometimes to get myself to do it, since the most important thing for me on this series is really the city planning and how it all comes together. And sure, I like detailing, but if you already have an idea of what you're going for, then detailing is just the kind of thing that you have to put time into and not really anything else. It's just placing down a lot of stuff, and it's that kind of time-consuming thing which I'm not always an enormous fan of. But you know, why am I even venting about this? Anyway, I do sometimes. I don't know why. It's just so satisfying to build planters and then put trees in them. I'm not even sure why. It's just oddly satisfying. But I'm just finishing off some of these other areas, which is kind of the boring stuff where I would kind of love to talk about some other stuff. There was actually some very interesting ideas that I actually crossed my mind and that I found around the internet about the issue of housing. Because one of the things that I originally said I would set out to do in the city is to actually make it pretty equal. Because many of these projects right now, especially the projects that are like boasting about being super sustainable and green and being awesome cities, are pretty much just circle jerks for all the rich people, and there is no way that you're ever gonna find any lower classes in any of these extremely like high quality sustainable city developments. It just doesn't happen. And what I sort of found funny and interesting about this is the quote that affordable housing just isn't affordable, because there's a lack of affordable housing in a lot of the US as well, and it's something which, as a Dutch person, I wasn't really getting behind, since how it works in the Netherlands is that there are actually specific companies set up that have to provide affordable housing for people. So there's not usually a shortage for it, and these they're not really companies, they're more like organizations, and they pretty much make sure that there is enough to go around for. But it's kind of interesting because so far there's like a couple of problems. Sometimes there's just not enough for lower incomes of housing, but in many cases even any low income housing is just gonna look ugly. Like, why are the buildings that are meant for poor people ugly? I mean, I don't want to get too anti-capitalism here, but that's something that I just found really interesting. So what I'm trying to do here, which takes a lot of imagination, especially from the Bahraini government, is that a lot of the housing over here would be subsidied in a similar way, perhaps, to how it's done in the Netherlands, because otherwise it's just not affordable, and it just sort of blends in to the rest of the architecture. There will definitely be a lot of variety in the buildings in the city, but that's also kind of what I'm hoping to do, to make it a bit more interesting, and much more interesting than a planned city, which is just the same architecture all over. And yeah, by that, just sort of make sure that there's high income and low income housing around the place, just sort of mixed together, and in a way that both kinds of people can live in the city, and not just have it become one hotbed for anybody who has the money to go here, but not for anybody else. But that's really just going a lot into the ideals that are behind the city and not any of the gameplay, except for the fact that I'll obviously be having some areas that are just more heavily houses. There will be definitely some differences between some lower quality flats and some of the extremely high quality flats. Like I do have the skyscraper right in the middle of the city, which is the tallest skyscraper, which is actually residential as well. That would definitely be high quality penthouses. But I'll also be having some very small houses on some of the outskirts. Some of these one grid houses and houses that you can have a lot of in a small space and still keep it efficient, while at the same time not having them become expensive in any way just because they're very small. But that's just a lot of very off-topic talk that I just wanted to get into because it's something, I don't know, I just found it very interesting, and it's something that I didn't hear anybody talk about in the comment section, but it's one of the things, one of those pesky real-life things that would definitely be an obstacle for anybody trying to do this kind of very ambitious thing in real life. It just doesn't work as well in real life, and you know, the game is just this sort of sandbox where you can try anything, but in real life politics and economics will definitely get in the way. Anyway, that is just about it for the time lapse. I've done a lot of detailing, and at this point I wasn't 100% finished, but I was 100% finished with detailing myself, so I don't know, I'll do that some later episode and get back to it. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.